welcome to Virtusa TechTalk, our series dedicated to exploring technology trends that make an impact. I'm your host, Danielle Panici, and today we're discussing a very interesting topic on open banking in Canada. The introduction of open banking in Canada will have a profound impact on consumers as banks, FinTechs, and other service providers start introducing innovative products and services based on open access to data. We will also see significant transformation in how banks, FinTechs, and other service providers partner with each other in the financial services ecosystem. To discuss the future of open banking across the globe, and Canada in particular, we have with us today Hans Teselaar, Executive Director at Buy-in, Fatima Perron, Senior Director for Enterprise Innovation at CIBC, and Piyush Patil, VP of Banking and Financial Services Canada at Virtusa. To get us started, Hans, what lessons can be learned from open banking initiatives around the world?
Well, what we see that let's say open banking is also a sort of a container, and so there are a lot of different definitions of open banking, and there are also a lot of different stages open bankings are around the globe. So some regions are live, some are in the implementation phase, and some are in what we call the consultation phase. And within all those different regions, we see three main, we call it buckets. So we have the regulatory mandated ones. So regulatory mandated, as stated, is more or less mandated by the regulators, usually the central banks or Ministry of Finance, and you find them in the EU, you find them in the UK, Canada, Australia, as an example. And that implies that everything is very, very, very strictly regulated. So the products are in scope, the banks are extremely regulated, the FinTechs are extremely regulated, and it's all based on consent from the consumer, and the standards are also very specified and detailed. Then we have more what we call the regulatory encouraged, what you see in Southeast Asia, where it's all about enhanced collaboration, encourage innovation, financial inclusion, and the products in scope are prescribed. And there are guidelines and so on and so forth, but that's more or less it. And then we have the third bucket, and that's market-driven, like China and the United States. And that's all about encourage innovation to create competitive advantage and cost reductions. So it's led by banks and FinTechs. The products in scope vary, and the standards, the interoperability standards are voluntary or industry network. So there is a huge difference, and the difference also implies the speed of implementation. And so we see that in the regulatory mandated one, it goes rather slow, and there is no real, let's say, market pull. It's more a push mechanism, and the question is always, does the consumers, the clients, ready for it? While in the market-driven, it goes what the consumer wants. That's what they're going to offer. So that's my overview of what the different flavors are around the globe.
Great. And what's driving the open banking initiatives in Canada, Fatima?
I would say there's several factors that are really contributing to the open banking initiatives in Canada. The first factor, I think, is definitely fueled by the global activity in various jurisdictions. Canadian industry players, regulators, FinTechs, incumbents alike, they've been looking at developments, especially in the UK, in Australia, to gain learnings and to develop a view on what open banking can look like in Canada. Our Department of Finance has held an open consultation in open banking with industry stakeholders to receive inputs on things like whether open banking would provide meaningful benefits for Canadians, as well as on how to manage and mitigate related consumer protection, privacy, some cybersecurity risk. And what's probably also worth mentioning is trying to determine the role the federal government should play in enabling an open banking framework here in Canada. I would say the other factor is largely driven by experiences that we're seeing on the rise. These are the trends towards interconnectivity and open everything, the enablement of connectivity of services and products that are really expanding beyond just the product construct itself and shifting to become more about how we deliver value to clients instead of the product itself. And this also provides an opportunity to really overcome traditional processes that can be cumbersome and then simplified and made more accessible by the simple movement of data. Now, with that being said, I think Canada has its own unique factors and flavors, and exactly how things will unfold in this market will likely be unique on its own.
Thanks, Fatima. And what will the collaboration between banks and financial institutions in Canada look like, Peyush?
So, both of the collaboration would be underpinning two critical points that Hans and Fatima said. One is about consent, and the other is about open everything. Consumers and customers have seen excitements coming in from fintechs and various financial institutions in pockets of their overall financial journey. That whole integration of a seamless and a more exciting journey backed by the data provided by banks will be very exciting to consumers and provide competitive services across the board. One critical element of open banking is potentially integrating across the overall ecosystem, like Australia is doing, for example, through CDR, integrating with the utilities, integrating with other organization. So that gives a seamless customer journey for end customers. So open everything from a consent approved process. Enables a very exciting marketplace for consumers and banks and financial institutions to collaborate and reimagine the processes that have been there for many, many times.
And Hans, what has been the impact on banks and fintechs in the world, and what are some of the opportunities?
Well, what you see is that for decades the bank were a closed environment. Now they open up. They are looking to collaborate with all types of parties, fintechs, aggregators, and so on and so forth, to bring, let's say, better and new services to their customers. I also think that due to COVID, there's a huge acceleration from that perspective. So the people who used to go to the branches or used to pay cash, they more or less now forced more or less to do it digital, and people are now getting more acquainted with it. I think that's a huge step forward. So it's not scary anymore. The collaboration between the banks and the fintechs, it opens up the banks, gives them new opportunities, and the fintechs, they need to explore, let's say, a wider range of banking areas, functional areas that they can service, because today it's primarily focusing on payments, and I always say that's the easy part. So if it becomes lending or mortgages, or as one of our buyer members has integrated with the value chain of a travel agent. So there are a lot of, as stated earlier, openness, that is more than we can see today. So I think there is a huge area ahead of us that can be explored and can be, let's say, brought into practice.
And could you talk about a few immediate steps that banks and financial institutions can take now to accelerate data-driven transformation, especially during these times?
Yeah, well, I think that what we see is that we need to be very careful with the data. So the data protection is, of course, extremely important, so similar like privacy and all the privacy rules. So I think that should always be in the back of our minds. And then it's sometimes very difficult to identify what does the customer want. So not what do we have to offer. And it becomes like the T-Ford, so we only have them in black. they are in all colors as long as it's black. I think we have to avoid that push mechanism. There should be a pull from the market. I live in the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands we are we have a very dense internet. Everybody has internet, everybody has fiber, and so on and so forth. So we are very much acquainted. So everybody's doing payments with each other from the mobile phone. If I go to the market and buy cheese, I can do e-payment and so on. So it's embedded. And I think if we can, from the bank and the FinTechs, make sure that everything we do is safe, secure, and proven, then we can roll it out to, let's say, the areas outside payment. I think that is the immediate step. Get the trust from the consumer and then build on the trust.
Yeah, I would agree with Hans, Daniel. The important three steps of moving on to this exciting journey is potentially from a banking perspective is potentially having the investments that banks have done around data and data lakes and warehouses and so forth. How can that be exposed to external agencies in a controlled manner? So consent and the mechanism around that and the protection of data around that is critical, and that in my view is step number one. Step number two potentially will be how does the data gets consumed, published first and then consumed through a standard and structured API, adopting a standard API taxonomy, something like Bayern prescribes. That will be step number two and is critical. And third, once the data and APIs are out, having a marketplace where all parties can collaborate with mutual trust will be very important, which essentially gives the banks not only opportunity to monetize their data and provide competing and differentiated services to consumer. It will also provide opportunities to other non-banking organizations to be ready for consumption of the financial data and the consent provided by consumers. And on the third leg, consumers can prepare themselves by understanding what data gets out, what is the amount of consent that they can give, and how do they kind of stop sharing data that they don't want to share. So that education is potentially also very important. So all these three legs can potentially start in parallel and are important immediate next steps for the adoption to increase.
I definitely agree with the things that both Hans and Payush are saying. I just want to double click a little bit on the consumers. I think one of the most important things that we can do is to ensure that we're taking our consumers along on the journey. So no matter how transformative that data-driven solutions may be, unless we take the appropriate steps to properly explain the ins and the outs of it, and especially in the context of what we mean by open banking ecosystems to consumers and with the services that will be enabled by it and how, that adoption and impacts will be limited. When I look at the journey in the UK so far, and in my view, I think it's been heavily regulatory driven, and hence the uptake has been a bit slow. I think certainly the aggressive regulatory approach played a role in that, but also that it was implemented without real marketing or communications to client, without really properly explaining some of those aspects of open banking ecosystems to consumers. And frankly, when I look at the Canadian context, I'm yet to see consumers' opinion included in the consultation work that's happening here as well. So I think all of us have a role to play and engage with our own clients to bring them along on this journey. And then the second part, I think it's important to that we can also play a role currently, is that we have to recognize that we're going to have to allow our clients to share their data in a modern world. So we need to start testing and building those capabilities. There's literally no question about open banking coming to Canada. And if we want to remain competitive, I think we need to ensure that we're collaborating and enabling things in a way that continues to ensure the safety of our clients' data. This means that we need to build that infrastructure, develop the programs, and create products and services that allow clients to use their data, to share their data for more than just banking.
Awesome. Thank you, Fatima, Piyush, and Hans, for all of your insights today on the state of open banking and how Canada is poised to take advantage of this. As the concept gains traction around the world and consumers demand for increased convenience and choices, it's clear that data privacy, governance, and consent will drive new ways of doing business. And it's only a matter of time before open banking fundamentally reshapes the industry globally. And a big thank you as well to everyone who watched this episode of Virtusa Tech Talk, and I want to wish you all a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.